Millionaire sees a poor girl being abandoned in a storm. What she whispered in his ear makes him cry. Before we embark on this emotional journey, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's dive into a story that will touch your heart. Enjoy. Thunder crashed across the Seattle skyline as Marcus Wellington's Bentley pulled through the iron gates of his estate. At 42, the CEO of Wellington Industries had mastered the art of controlling everything in his world. Everything except the grief that still haunted him 3 years after losing his son Ethan. The mansion stood dark against the storm, its empty windows reflecting Marcus's solitary life. Since Ethan's accident, he'd thrown himself into work with desperate intensity, building his empire into a multi-billion-dollar fortress that kept the world, and his pain, at bay. Lightning illuminated the covered entrance as Marcus stepped from his car. That's when he saw her. A woman in a soaked coat was gently placing a small figure on his doorstep. The child, maybe 6 years old, sat motionless in the rain, her dark hair plastered against her pale face. "Please," the woman called, out when she spotted Marcus. "Please, Mr. Wellington, I can't feed her anymore." Marcus froze, his briefcase heavy in his hand. He'd spent years avoiding exactly this kind of human complication. The woman, thin, desperate, with kind eyes, stepped back as he approached. "Her name is Isabella. She's a good girl, so smart. She just needs someone who can take care of her properly." Marcus knelt beside the child, rain soaking through his expensive suit. Isabella looked up at him with enormous brown eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so young. Then she spoke, her small voice barely audible above the storm. "Me leve para casa, papai." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Take me home, Daddy." The exact phrase Ethan used to whisper when he was scared or tired, always in the Portuguese their nanny had taught him. Marcus's hands trembled as he scooped Isabella into his arms. She was so light, so fragile, yet something about holding her felt achingly familiar. When he looked up to thank the woman, she had vanished into the storm. Standing there in the rain, holding this unexpected child who spoke his dead son's words, Marcus Wellington realized his carefully controlled world was about to change forever. Marcus carried Isabella through the marble foyer, her small body shivering against his chest. Water dripped from their clothes onto the pristine floors as he made his way to the living room, a space that had remained untouched since Ethan's death. "Mario, you hungry, sweetheart?" he asked softly, setting her down on the leather sofa. Isabella nodded, her dark eyes scanning the room with quiet intelligence. She pointed to a framed photograph on the side table, Ethan laughing on his bicycle, the same age as Isabella. "That's Ethan," Marcus said, his voice catching. "He was my son." "Was?" Isabella's question was gentle, but it cut deep. He went to heaven," Marcus managed. Isabella climbed down from the sofa and walked to the photograph. She studied it carefully, then turned back to Marcus with startling directness. "He looks like me," she observed. Marcus blinked. She was right. Both children shared the same delicate features, the same serious expression, even the same way of tilting their heads when curious. In the kitchen, Marcus heated soup, while Isabella sat at the breakfast bar, her legs dangling from the tall chair. As she ate, she hummed softly, the same melody Ethan used to hum when he was content. "Isabella," Marcus said carefully, "the lady who brought you, did she tell you anything about me?" Isabella paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Miss Celeste said you were very sad, but that you had a big heart. She said you would understand about missing people." The innocence of her words nearly undid him. How could a stranger know so much about his pain? "She said my real daddy was waiting for me," Isabella continued, her eyes meeting his. "And that when I found him, I would know." Marcus's breath caught. "How would you know?" Isabella smiled for the first time since arriving, a radiant expression that transformed her entire face. "Because he would need me as much as I need him." That night, as Marcus tucked Isabella into Ethan's bed, she reached up and touched his face with her small hand. "Thank you for bringing me home," she whispered. Alone in his study, Marcus stared at the storm through his window, wondering if fate had just given him the most precious gift or the greatest test of his life. Marcus jolted awake at dawn, his heart pounding. For a moment he wondered if the previous night had been an elaborate dream, born from grief and exhaustion. Then he heard it, soft humming from down the hall. He found Isabella in Ethan's room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, carefully arranging his old toy cars in perfect rows. She had changed into one of Ethan's shirts, which hung like a dress on her small frame. "Good morning," she said without looking up, continuing her meticulous organization. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. The way she lined up the cars, the intense concentration on her face, even the little furrow between her eyebrows. It was exactly how Ethan used to play. "Isabella, do you remember playing with cars before?" She shook her head. "But they feel right in my hands." After breakfast, Isabella explored the mansion with quiet curiosity. In Marcus's study, she stopped before a wall of business awards and photographs. Her fingers traced the air above a picture of Marcus receiving his first major industry recognition. "You look lonely here," she observed. The comment caught him off guard. It was a happy day. "Your eyes say different." She tilted her head, studying him with unsettling perception. "Mama taught me to read faces." Marcus's chest tightened. "What else did your mama teach you?" "That sometimes people smile on the outside, when they're crying inside." Later, while Marcus worked on his laptop, Isabella sat at the coffee table with paper and crayons he'd hastily bought. When she finished, she proudly showed him her drawing, a landscape of rolling hills with a single oak tree, rendered with remarkable detail for a 6-year-old. Marcus's blood went cold. It was identical to dozens of drawings Ethan had made. Always the same tree, the same hills. The psychiatrist had said it represented security and family roots. "Where did you see this place?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Isabella shrugged. "It lives in my dreams. Do you know it?" Marcus stared at the drawing, his hands trembling slightly. 2 children, years apart, drawing the same impossible landscape they'd never seen, humming the same melody, using the same Portuguese phrase. "Isabella," he said softly, "how do you feel about staying here with me for a while?" Her face lit up with pure joy. "Forever?" "We'll start with a while," Marcus said, though something deep inside him was already whispering that forever might not be long enough. Marcus stood in the children's clothing section of Nordstrom, completely out of his element. Isabella needed proper clothes, but he had no idea what 6-year-old girls wore. He approached shopping like a business acquisition, methodical, efficient, overwhelming. "We need everything," he told the sales associate, gesturing broadly. "School clothes, play clothes, pajamas, shoes." Isabella tugged at his sleeve. "Papai Marcus, I don't need so much." The Portuguese endearment made his heart skip. She'd started calling him that naturally, as if she'd always known him. "You need whatever makes you comfortable," Marcus replied, loading the cart with more items than one child could wear in a year. Back home, Marcus attempted to establish structure. He hired Mrs. Rebecca Chen, a highly recommended nanny, and scheduled Isabella's days like board meetings. Piano lessons, tutoring, swimming classes, anything that might help her reach her potential. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Chen said diplomatically, "perhaps we should let Isabella adjust before overwhelming her with activities." But Marcus was used to solving problems through resources and planning. He couldn't understand why Isabella seemed withdrawn during her scheduled enrichment time. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While Marcus took an important conference call, Isabella wandered into his home office. When he finished, he found her arranging his desk accessories into patterns, paper clips sorted by size, pens aligned, perfectly parallel. "Sorry," she said quickly, noticing his stare. "I like when things have order." Marcus sat beside her, loosening his tie. "So do I. Would you like to help me organize my files?" For the next hour, they worked side by side. Isabella proved remarkably intuitive about systems and logic. She asked thoughtful questions about his business, displaying a sharp mind that reminded him of himself at that age. "Why do you work so much?" she asked, carefully stacking documents. "To build something lasting," Marcus replied automatically, then paused. "To make sure we have everything we need." Isabella looked up at him with those wise brown eyes. "I think we already have what we need." That evening, as Marcus watched Isabella sleep in Ethan's room, he realized he'd been approaching parenthood like a corporate merger, trying to control every variable instead of simply being present. Tomorrow, he decided, they would have pancakes for breakfast. No schedules, no structured activities. Just pancakes and whatever conversation a 6-year-old wanted to have. For the first time in years, Marcus Wellington was learning that the most important things couldn't be planned or purchased. They had to be lived. Late that night, after Isabella had gone to bed, Marcus found himself drawn to the locked drawer in his study, a place he hadn't opened in over 7 years. His hands shook slightly as he turned the small brass key. Inside lay the remnants of his life with Victoria Harrington. Ticket stubs from concerts they'd attended, handwritten love letters, a pressed flower from their first picnic. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small velvet box containing the engagement ring he'd never had the courage to give her. Marcus lifted out a photograph. Victoria at 22, her dark hair catching sunlight, brown eyes sparkling with laughter. The same eyes that looked back at him every day now from Isabella's face. "God, Victoria," he whispered to the picture. "I was such a fool." They'd met during his final year at Stanford. She was studying art therapy. He was obsessed with his business degree. Victoria had been everything he wasn't. Spontaneous, nurturing, patient with his relentless ambition. She'd believed in him when he was just another broke student with impossible dreams. Marcus unfolded one of her letters, her graceful handwriting still clear after all these years. "Marcus, my darling workaholic, I know you think you need to conquer the world before we can be happy. But happiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you choose every single day. I'm choosing you always. I just pray someday you'll choose me too." He'd been building Wellington Industries from nothing then, working 18-hour days, missing dinners, canceling dates. Victoria had tried to be understanding, but gradually her calls became less frequent, her smile more strained. The final fight was burned into his memory. Victoria had planned a romantic weekend to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. Marcus had canceled at the last minute for a crucial investor meeting. "When will it be enough, Marcus?" she'd asked, tears streaming down her face. "When will you have built enough, earned enough, proven enough?" "Just a little longer," he'd promised. "Once the company is stable, there will always be another deal, another milestone," Victoria had said quietly. "I can't keep waiting for someday." She'd left the next morning. Marcus had convinced himself he'd made the right choice. His company was more important than romantic complications. Wellington Industries had indeed become an empire, but the cost had been everything else that mattered. Now, staring at Victoria's photograph while sounds of Isabella's gentle breathing drifted from down the hall, Marcus felt the full weight of his choices. Victoria had wanted a family, children, a life filled with love and laughter. He'd offered her loneliness and empty promises. Marcus closed the box carefully but kept Victoria's photo on his desk. Tomorrow, he would begin trying to find out what had happened to her. Something deep in his gut told him that Isabella's appearance wasn't coincidence, it was connected to Victoria somehow. As he prepared for bed, one thought haunted him. What if he'd made the same mistake twice? What if his obsession with control and success had already cost him another chance at the family he'd never realized he wanted? Marcus woke to the smell of burning toast and the sound of Isabella humming in the kitchen. He found her standing on a chair, carefully buttering what appeared to be charcoal, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Good morning, sweetheart," Marcus said, gently taking the knife from her hands. "What are we making?" "Breakfast for you," Isabella announced, proudly. "Miss Rebecca taught me yesterday, but I think I cooked it too long." Marcus's chest warmed. No one had made him breakfast in years, burned or otherwise. "It looks perfect," he said, taking a deliberate bite. "Though maybe we could make it together next time." Isabella's face lit up. "Really? You want to cook with me? I want to do lots of things with you." Their morning routine began organically. Marcus found himself waking earlier, not for conference calls but to share coffee and orange juice while Isabella told him elaborate stories about her dreams. She had an extraordinary imagination, spinning tales about castles and clouds and dragons who were actually lonely and just needed friends. "You should write these down," Marcus suggested one morning. "I can't write very well yet," Isabella admitted, "but I can draw them." Marcus bought her an easel and professional art supplies. Isabella's eyes went wide when she saw the setup in the sunroom. "This is all for me?" "All for you," Marcus confirmed, then watched in amazement as she began to paint. Isabella's talent was undeniable. Her brushstrokes were confident, her color choices sophisticated. But it was the emotional depth of her work that took Marcus's breath away. She painted feelings, loneliness as empty swings in rain, happiness as sunbeams breaking through storm clouds. "Where did you learn to paint like this?" Marcus asked, watching her create a masterpiece of a lighthouse standing strong against crashing waves. "Mama taught me," Isabella said softly. "She said painting helps when words aren't big enough for feelings." That evening, Isabella presented him with a new painting, a family portrait that made Marcus's throat tight. She'd painted herself holding hands with a tall man in a business suit, standing in front of a large house. Above them, painted in soft ethereal strokes, was a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. "That's us," Isabella explained, pointing to herself and Marcus. "And that's my mama watching over us from heaven." Marcus knelt to her level, studying the woman in the painting. The resemblance to Victoria was unmistakable. The same gentle smile, the same expressive eyes. "She's beautiful," Marcus whispered. "She would have liked you," Isabella said with certainty. "She told me my real papai would have a good heart, even if he was too busy to see it sometimes." The words hit Marcus like lightning. "She told you about your real father?" Isabella nodded, climbing onto his lap with the natural ease of a child who trusted completely. "She said he loved his work very much, but that someday he would love me more." Marcus held her close, breathing in her little girl scent of apple shampoo and paint. "What else did she tell you?" "That when I found him, I would make him remember how to smile with his whole face, not just his mouth." Looking down at Isabella's earnest expression, Marcus realized she was right. For the first time in years, his smiles felt genuine, reaching all the way to his eyes. "Papai Marcus," Isabella said sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad the storm brought me to you." As Marcus carried her to bed, Victoria's painting seemed to watch them with approval. Whatever forces had brought Isabella into his life, Marcus was beginning to understand that he'd been given something more precious than all his business success combined, a second chance at being the man Victoria had always believed he could become. 3 weeks had transformed Marcus Wellington's life in ways he never thought possible. The mansion that had felt like a mausoleum now echoed with laughter and the patter of small feet. Isabella's presence had breathed life into every corner of their home. Their mornings had developed a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Marcus would wake at 6, not for early meetings, but to prepare breakfast for Isabella. She always emerged from her room at exactly 7:15, hair slightly mussed, clutching a different stuffed animal each day. "Bom dia, Papai Marcus," she'd say in Portuguese, a language she claimed to have learned from Mama's songs. "Good morning, my little artist," Marcus would reply, pouring fresh orange juice into her favorite cup, a simple ceramic mug with painted flowers that she'd chosen herself. Marcus had shocked his entire executive team by implementing Isabella hours. No meetings before 9 a.m. or after 4 p.m. No business calls during dinner. No work on Sundays. His assistant, David, had initially protested, but the results spoke for themselves. Marcus was more focused, more creative, more decisive during his condensed work schedule. "You seem different," his cousin David had observed during their last board meeting. More centered. Marcus had simply smiled. How could he explain that watching a 6-year-old discover the world had reminded him why success mattered in the first place? Isabella flourished at Westfield Academy, the private school Marcus had selected. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, called weekly with glowing reports about Isabella's intelligence and emotional maturity. She has a gift for bringing out the best in other children, Mrs. Patterson had explained. Yesterday, she spent her entire recess helping a shy classmate who was crying. Isabella told him that sometimes people just need someone to sit with them until the sad feelings get smaller. The comment had made Marcus's chest tight with pride. Somehow, despite her young age and uncertain past, Isabella possessed a wisdom and compassion that humbled him. Their evening routine was sacred. After dinner, they would settle in the library. Isabella curled in the oversized armchair, Marcus reading aloud from whatever book she'd chosen. Currently, they were working through The Secret Garden. Isabella's eyes wide with fascination as Mary Lennox discovered her hidden world. "Do you think everyone has a secret garden, Popeye Marcus?" Isabella had asked the night before. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "A place inside where beautiful things can grow even when everything outside looks broken." Marcus had set down the book, struck by her insight. "I think you might be right. I think you have a secret garden too," Isabella had continued, snuggling deeper into her chair, "and I think it was sleeping until I came to wake it up." Now, as Marcus watched Isabella paint in the sunroom, he marveled at how completely she'd changed his perspective. The driven CEO who'd once measured success in quarterly profits now found joy in finger paintings taped to the refrigerator. The man who'd isolated himself in grief now looked forward to bedtime stories and breakfast conversations. Isabella looked up from her easel, paint smudged on her cheek. "Popeye Marcus, are you happy?" The question was so direct, so honestly curious, that Marcus felt his breath catch. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm very happy." "Good," Isabella said, returning to her painting with satisfaction. "Mama always said happiness grows bigger when you share it." As afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating Isabella's concentrated work and filling their home with golden warmth, Marcus realized that for the first time in years, he truly understood what happiness meant. He had everything he needed right here. Watching his daughter create beauty with fearless joy, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of this unexpected, perfect life they'd built together. The first sign of trouble came during Wellington Industries' monthly board meeting. Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, his attention split between quarterly projections and the text Isabella had sent from school, a photo of a butterfly she'd found during recess accompanied by, "Look, it has the same colors as my painting." "Marcus, are you listening?" David Wellington's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Marcus looked up to find 12 pairs of eyes staring at him expectantly. His cousin David, who served as chief operating officer, wore an expression of barely concealed frustration. "I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?" David's jaw tightened. "The Yamamoto deal. They're requesting a face-to-face meeting in Tokyo next week. It's worth $800 million. "Schedule it for the following week," Marcus replied absently, checking his watch. Isabella's art class ended in 30 minutes and he'd promised to pick her up. "Marcus." David leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "This is the third major meeting you've postponed this month. The investors are starting to ask questions." "What kind of questions?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Board member Richard Carlyle cleared his throat uncomfortably. "They're wondering if your personal situation is affecting your commitment to the company." The euphemism hung in the air like a threat. Marcus's personal situation. They meant Isabella. "My commitment to Wellington Industries has never wavered," Marcus said coldly, then explained the declined travel schedule, the restricted meeting hours, the missed conference calls. David pressed. "Marcus, I understand you're going through something, but this company employs 12,000 people. We have responsibilities." Marcus stood, straightening his tie. "This meeting is over. We'll revisit the Yamamoto situation tomorrow." As the room emptied, David lingered behind. Marcus, we need to talk privately. I'm late for Isabella's pickup. This is exactly what I'm talking about, David exploded. 6 weeks ago, you would have worked until midnight to close the Yamamoto deal. Now you're rushing out for school pickup like some suburban dad. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Marcus replied quietly. David's expression softened slightly. Look, I get it. After losing Ethan, finding this kid probably feels like a miracle. But Marcus, you're substituting one child for another. It's not healthy. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Isabella is not a substitute for anything, isn't she? Think about it. Mysterious child appears on your doorstep speaking Portuguese like Ethan did, drawing the same pictures, even sleeping in his room. Don't you find that convenient? Marcus felt his temper flare. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you might be so desperate to fill the void Ethan left that you're not thinking clearly. This child comes from nowhere, with no documentation, no background check. What do you really know about her? I know she's mine, Marcus said fiercely. David shook his head. She's not yours, Marcus. She's a stranger's child that you've gotten attached to, and when child services finally gets involved, which they will, you're going to lose her too. But by then you'll have destroyed everything we've built. The words echoed in the empty boardroom long after David left. Marcus stood alone, surrounded by the trappings of his success, wondering if his cousin might be right. Was he being naive? Was his judgment clouded by grief and longing? His phone buzzed again, Isabella's art teacher asking if everything was okay since he was late. Marcus grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Whatever doubts David had planted would have to wait. Right now, a little girl was waiting for him, and nothing, not the board, not David, not even his own fears, would make him break that promise. But as he drove toward Westfield Academy, Marcus couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that his perfect new world was about to be tested in ways he wasn't prepared for. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Marcus was helping Isabella practice her Portuguese vocabulary words. His phone displayed a number he didn't recognize, but the crisp, professional voice on the other end made his stomach clench. Mr. Wellington, this is Patricia Hayes from Child Protective Services. I need to schedule a home visit regarding Isabella Morrison. Marcus's blood ran cold. Isabella looked up from her workbook, immediately sensing the change in his demeanor. I'm sorry, who referred this case to you? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. We received an anonymous report expressing concern about an undocumented child living in your home. This is standard procedure, Mr. Wellington. We just need to verify that Isabella is in a safe, appropriate environment. After hanging up, Marcus knelt beside Isabella's chair. Sweetheart, a lady is going to come visit us next week. She just wants to make sure you're happy and safe here. Isabella's eyes widened with fear. Are they going to take me away? No, Marcus said firmly, though uncertainty gnawed at him. No one is taking you anywhere. But Isabella had grown quiet, and that evening Marcus found her packing her few possessions into a small bag. What are you doing? He asked gently. Getting ready, she whispered. Miss Celeste used to say that families like us don't get to stay in places like this very long. Marcus sat on the bed, his heart breaking. Isabella, look at me. This is your home. I am your family. Nothing is going to change that. The home visit 2 days later was excruciating. Mrs. Hayes, a stern woman with kind eyes, interviewed Isabella privately while Marcus waited in his study, every minute feeling like an hour. She's clearly well cared for, Mrs. Hayes said afterward, reviewing her notes. But Mr. Wellington, there are some irregularities I need to address. Such as? You have no legal guardianship paperwork, no documentation of how Isabella came to be in your care, and frankly, no proof that the woman who left her had any right to do so. Marcus felt the walls closing in. What are you saying? I'm saying that until we can verify Isabella's background and establish proper legal guardianship, this situation remains precarious. If her biological family comes forward— I am her family, Marcus interrupted. Mrs. Hayes softened slightly. Mr. Wellington, I can see you care deeply for Isabella, but the law requires documentation. Without it, I have to recommend that Isabella be placed in temporary foster care while we sort this out. That evening, Marcus found Isabella sitting in Ethan's old window seat, staring out at the gardens. The lady thinks I should go away, doesn't she? Isabella asked without turning around. Marcus sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. She's just doing her job, but I'm going to fight for you, Isabella, I promise. What if you can't? Her voice was so small, so resigned. What if I have to leave? Marcus took her small hand in his. Then I'll find you. No matter where they take you, no matter how long it takes, I'll find you and bring you home. Isabella finally looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Do you promise? I promise. Later that night, Marcus sat in his study, surrounded by legal documents and phone numbers for family lawyers. His cousin David's words echoed in his mind. When child services gets involved, you're going to lose her too. But looking at the drawings Isabella had made covering his office walls, pictures of their life together, images of the family they'd become, Marcus knew he would move heaven and earth before he let that happen. His phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number. I heard about the CPS visit, David said without preamble. Marcus, this is exactly what I was worried about. You need to cut your losses before this gets worse. She's not a business deal, David. No, she's a legal liability, one that could destroy everything we've built. Marcus hung up and stared at Victoria's photograph on his desk. Somewhere in his gut he knew the answers lay with her, with their past, with the connection he felt but couldn't explain. Tomorrow, he would start searching for the truth about Isabella's origins. Because losing her wasn't an option he was willing to accept. The crisis erupted at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Marcus was reviewing legal strategies with his attorney when Rebecca burst into his office, her face pale with panic. Sir, the Tokyo deal. Yamamoto is pulling out. They're meeting with our competitor at 4 o'clock. If we lose this contract, $800 million. Marcus finished grimly. The deal that David had warned him about, the one he'd postponed for Isabella's school events. Get them on the phone now. For the next hour, Marcus fought desperately to salvage the negotiation. Yamamoto Corporation was furious about the delayed meetings, the rescheduled calls, what they perceived as disrespect toward their company culture. Mr. Wellington, came the accented voice through the speakerphone. We require immediate commitment. You fly to Tokyo tonight, or we proceed with Harrison Industries. Marcus glanced at his calendar. Tonight was Isabella's first school play. She was playing a sunflower in the spring pageant. She'd practiced her lines for weeks, her excitement infectious. I need to discuss logistics with my team, Marcus said. Can I call you back in 30 minutes? 30 minutes, Mr. Wellington. No more delays. The line went dead. Marcus sat in the suffocating silence, the weight of his empire pressing down on him. Wellington Industries employed 12,000 people. 800 million could fund expansion, create new jobs, secure their market position for years. His phone buzzed, a text from Isabella's teacher. Isabella keeps asking if you remembered about tonight. She's so excited to see you in the audience. Marcus closed his eyes. He could take the red-eye, attend the play, then fly to Tokyo. But Yamamoto had been clear. They wanted him there tonight for the morning meeting. Any further delay would lose the deal permanently. His office door opened. David entered without knocking, his expression grim. Marcus, the board is in emergency session. Half of them want your resignation if you don't get on that plane tonight. Isabella has her play tonight. Marcus, for God's sake, it's a school play. Children perform in school plays every day, but Wellington Industries might not survive losing Yamamoto. The words hit like physical blows. Marcus thought of his employees, their families, the legacy he'd built. Then he thought of Isabella's face as she practiced her sunflower dance in the living room. Book the flight, Marcus said quietly. David's relief was palpable. I'll call Yamamoto immediately. That evening, Marcus stood in Isabella's doorway watching her apply yellow face paint with trembling hands. She was wearing her costume, a bright yellow dress with felt petals around the collar. "Popeye Marcus, do you like my costume?" she asked, spinning in a circle. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "I can't wait for you to see my dance. Mrs. Patterson says I'm the best sunflower in the whole class." Marcus knelt beside her, his heart shattering. "Isabella, I need to tell you something. I have to go on a business trip tonight. It's very important for the company." Isabella's face fell. The joy drained from her eyes like water from a broken pitcher. "Tonight? But it's my play tonight." "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Rebecca will take you, and we'll record everything, so I can watch it when I get back." "But you promised." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You promised you would be there." Marcus reached for her, but Isabella stepped back, her costume petals trembling. "You're leaving me," she said, tears beginning to spill. "Just like everyone else leaves me." "No, Isabella, I'm coming back. It's just a few days." "You're lying." Isabella's composure cracked completely. "Miss Celeste said my real daddy would never leave me, but you're not my real daddy, are you? You're just pretending until you get tired of me." The accusation cut deeper than any business failure ever could. Marcus watched helplessly as Isabella ran to her room and slammed the door. An hour later, as his driver loaded his luggage, Marcus knocked softly on Isabella's door. Silence. "Isabella, I'll call you every day. We'll video chat. I'll be back Sunday, I promise." Still nothing. Marcus pressed his forehead against the door, hearing soft sobbing from inside. Every instinct screamed at him to abandon the trip, to choose the little girl who needed him over the company that would survive without him. But he thought of David's words, of 12,000 employees, of the empire he'd spent his life building. He left for the airport with Isabella's tears echoing in his ears and the terrible knowledge that he'd just made the worst mistake of his life. Marcus's phone rang at 3 a.m. Tokyo time. He'd been awake anyway, staring at the city lights through his hotel window, unable to shake the image of Isabella's devastated face. The Yamamoto meeting had been successful. The contract was signed. 800 million secured, but victory felt like ash in his mouth. "Mr. Wellington?" Rebecca's voice was tight with worry. "You need to come home immediately." Marcus bolted upright. "What's wrong?" "It's Isabella. She collapsed during the school play." The world tilted beneath Marcus's feet. "What do you mean collapsed?" "She was performing her sunflower dance when she just fell. They rushed her to Seattle Children's Hospital. She's been asking for you." Marcus was already reaching for his clothes. "How bad is it?" "The doctors aren't sure yet. She has a high fever, and she's been unconscious for several hours." "Marcus, she won't stop crying your name." The flight back to Seattle was the longest 8 hours of Marcus's life. He'd abandoned the Yamamoto celebration dinner, left David to handle the aftermath, and used every contact he had to get on the first available flight. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd gained 800 million but might lose the only thing that truly mattered. When Marcus burst through the hospital doors, still wearing his rumpled business suit from Tokyo, he found Mrs. Chen in the pediatric waiting room, her eyes red from crying. "Where is she?" Marcus demanded. "Room 314. The doctors are running more tests." Rebecca stood, her expression grave. "Marcus, there's something else. David filed a formal complaint with Child Protective Services while you were gone." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "What kind of complaint?" "He's claiming that your emotional instability and neglect of your business responsibilities make you unfit to care for Isabella. He's requesting emergency removal." The betrayal hit Marcus like a physical blow. His own cousin, his business partner, had used his absence to attack the most precious thing in his life. He said Isabella's collapse proves you're not equipped to handle a sick child. Rebecca continued quietly. "Mrs. Hayes is already here. She wants to interview Isabella when she wakes up." Marcus ran toward the elevator, taking the stairs 2 at a time when it moved too slowly. He found Isabella in a private room looking impossibly small in the hospital bed. Machines beeped softly around her, IV lines snaking from her thin arms. Dr. Sarah Martinez looked up as he entered. "You must be Mr. Wellington. I'm glad you're here. Isabella has been asking for her Popeye Marcus constantly." Marcus approached, the bed carefully, his heart breaking at Isabella's pale complexion and labored breathing. "What's wrong with her?" "We're still running tests, but her symptoms are concerning. High fever, dehydration, possible infection. Her immune system seems compromised, which is unusual for a healthy 6-year-old. Isabella's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his voice. "Popeye," she whispered weakly. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for your play." Tears leaked from the corners of Isabella's eyes. "I danced really good even though you couldn't see me." Marcus took her small hand, feeling how hot and fragile she was. "I'm sure you were the most beautiful sunflower in the whole world. Are you going to leave again?" Her voice was barely audible. "Never," Marcus said fiercely. "I'm never leaving you again." Dr. Martinez cleared her throat. "Mr. Wellington, Isabella's condition is quite serious. We may need to consider more aggressive treatment options, including blood transfusions if her counts don't improve." The mention of blood transfusions triggered something in Marcus's memory. A conversation with Victoria years ago about rare blood types running in her family. But he pushed the thought aside, focusing entirely on Isabella's face. "Whatever she needs," Marcus said. "Cost is no object." Outside in the hallway, Patricia Hayes waited with her clipboard and stern expression. "Mr. Wellington, I need to speak with you about Isabella's welfare. Given her medical emergency and your recent absence, we have serious concerns about the stability of her living situation." Marcus looked through the door at Isabella, so small and vulnerable in her hospital bed, then back at Mrs. Hayes. "My daughter is fighting for her life," he said quietly. "Everything else can wait." For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Wellington had his priorities absolutely clear. No deal, no company, no amount of money mattered more than the little girl in that hospital bed who called him Popeye. He just prayed it wasn't too late to prove it. The emergency board meeting convened at 6 a.m. in the Wellington Industries conference room. Marcus sat at the head of the table, still wearing wrinkled clothes from the hospital, his hair disheveled and eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights at Isabella's bedside. David stood at the presentation screen, every inch the polished executive Marcus had once been. "Gentlemen, we're facing a crisis of leadership. While our CEO was in Tokyo for 6 hours, he's now been absent for 3 full days. My daughter is in the hospital," Marcus said quietly. "A child you've known for 2 months. Board Chairman Richard Carlisle interjected. "Marcus, you're emotional. Attachment is clouding your judgment. Wellington Industries stock has dropped 8% since news of your situation became public." David clicked to the next slide. "Our competitors are circling. Harrison Industries is actively poaching our clients. We need decisive leadership, not a CEO torn between business and personal complications." Marcus looked around the table at faces he'd worked alongside for years. Men who'd celebrated his successes, who'd built their own fortunes on his vision. Now they stared at him with cold calculation. "What are you proposing?" Marcus asked. David's expression was almost sympathetic. "Temporary leave of absence. I'll serve as interim CEO while you sort out your personal issues. When you're ready to refocus on the company, no." Marcus's voice cut through the room like steel. "I won't be taking leave." Relief flickered across several faces until Marcus continued. "I'm resigning. Effective immediately." The silence was deafening. David's carefully prepared presentation forgotten, he stared at his cousin in shock. "Marcus, you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." Marcus stood, straightening his tie with practiced precision. "David, congratulations, you're now CEO of Wellington Industries." "You can't be serious," Richard sputtered. "This company is your life's work." Marcus walked to the floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, the empire he'd built through ruthless ambition and calculated sacrifice. "No," he said quietly. My life's work is lying in a hospital bed calling for her papai. Everything else is just business. David recovered first, his shock transforming into something harder. Fine, but don't expect this gesture to help you keep the girl. I've accelerated the custody proceedings. The hearing is tomorrow. Marcus turned, his eyes blazing with quiet fury. You did what? I petitioned for emergency custody based on your obvious emotional instability and abandonment of responsibilities. Isabella needs a stable family environment, not a grieving man projecting his dead son onto a random child. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Marcus stepped closer to David, his voice deadly calm. That random child is my daughter in every way that matters. And if you think I won't fight for her with everything I have, you clearly don't know me at all. Marcus walked out of Wellington Industries for the last time, leaving behind 15 years of empire building for the chance to hold a little girl's hand while she fought for her life. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez met him with troubling news. Isabella's condition has worsened. Her blood count is dangerously low and she's developed complications that suggest a rare autoimmune condition. We may need to perform an emergency transfusion. Do it, Marcus said without hesitation. We'll need to test for compatibility first. Are you willing to be tested as a potential donor? Marcus nodded immediately. Whatever she needs. As the nurse drew his blood, Marcus held Isabella's hand. She was unconscious now, her breathing shallow and labored. The machines around her bed beeped with increasing urgency. Stay with me, sweetheart, Marcus whispered. Popeye is here. I'm not going anywhere ever again. Patricia Hayes appeared in the doorway with official-looking documents. Mr. Wellington, the custody hearing has been moved to tomorrow morning. Given Isabella's medical condition, the judge wants to expedite the case. Marcus looked down at his daughter, because that's what she was regardless of DNA or legal documents, and felt a peace he'd never experienced in any boardroom victory. Let them come, he said quietly. I have everything I need right here. He'd traded his empire for the right to be Isabella's father. Now he just had to pray it would be enough to save her life and keep her in his arms. The blood test results arrived at 4 a.m. Dr. Martinez found Marcus slumped in the chair beside Isabella's bed, his hand still holding hers, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Mr. Wellington, we have the compatibility results. Dr. Martinez's expression was puzzled. This is unusual. Marcus straightened, forcing himself to focus. Can I donate? More than that. Your blood type is not only compatible, it's a perfect match. Remarkably perfect. The genetic markers suggest... She paused, checking her notes again. Are you certain you're not Isabella's biological father? The question hung in the air like a thunderbolt. Marcus stared at Isabella's peaceful face, his mind racing. What are you saying? The blood work shows genetic similarities that are extremely rare in unrelated individuals. I'd recommend a full DNA test, but right now, we need to focus on the transfusion. Isabella's condition is critical. 2 hours later, as Marcus's blood flowed into Isabella's small body, he sat beside her bed with his phone pressed to his ear, marshaling resources with the strategic precision that had built his empire. Jonathan, I need everything you can find on Victoria Harrington. Birth records, medical files, employment history, everything from 7 years ago until now. He paused as his private investigator confirmed the timeline. And I need it before noon today. The custody hearing is at 2 p.m. Next, he called his longtime attorney, Margaret Chen. Margaret, I need you to subpoena David's communications with Child Protective Services. There has to be a paper trail proving this was orchestrated. Marcus, that's your cousin. He's trying to take my daughter away while she's fighting for her life. Family loyalty ended when he filed that petition. Rebecca arrived at 8 a.m. with files, laptop, and the kind of organizational efficiency that made Marcus's chest tight with gratitude. She'd been more than an assistant for 7 years. She'd been his anchor through every business storm. I've compiled everything, she said, spreading documents across the small table. Financial records showing your stability, Testimonials from Isabella's teachers, medical records proving you've been an exemplary guardian. But Marcus, David has witnesses. What kind of witnesses? Board members willing to testify about your erratic behavior, the Tokyo incident, your resignation. He's painting you as emotionally unstable. Marcus studied the files with the same intensity he'd once applied to hostile takeovers. What about positive witnesses? Mrs. Patterson from Isabella's school agreed to testify. She says Isabella has never been happier or more secure. And Rebecca hesitated. I called Mrs. Chen, your former nanny. She wants to help. Mrs. Chen? Marcus looked up, surprised. She'd cared for Ethan before the accident. She says she's watched you transform from a workaholic into a devoted father. She wants to tell the court that she's never seen you as fulfilled as you've been with Isabella. At 10 a.m., Jonathan arrived with a thick folder. His expression was grim. Marcus, you need to sit down for this. Marcus remained standing, his hand still holding Isabella's. Just tell me. Victoria Harrington died 6 years ago. Complications. During childbirth. The baby survived. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. When? December 15th. The same day David handled that family emergency, you remember? The one where he disappeared for 3 days? Marcus's blood went cold. 6 years ago, David had claimed a family crisis required his immediate attention. Marcus had been furious about the timing. They were closing a major deal. But David had been adamant. The birth certificate lists the father as unknown, Jonathan continued. But there's more. Victoria had a friend at the hospital, a nurse named Elena Santos. She's willing to talk. Get her here, now. As Jonathan left to arrange the meeting, Marcus looked down at Isabella, her face finally showing signs of color from the transfusion, his blood running through her veins. His daughter, in every possible way. Dr. Martinez returned with updated test results. The transfusion is working beautifully. Her numbers are improving rapidly. She paused at the door. Mr. Wellington, I expedited the DNA test. Results should be available within hours. Marcus nodded, though deep in his heart he already knew what those results would reveal. The real question was, had David known all along? And if so, why had he kept Marcus from his own daughter? At noon, Patricia Hayes arrived for the pre-hearing interview, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes sympathetic. Mr. Wellington, I have to ask, are you prepared for the possibility that the court may rule against you? Marcus looked at Isabella, then at the evidence spread across the table. Proof of his love, his commitment, his transformation from a driven CEO into a devoted father. Mrs. Hayes, I'm prepared to fight for my daughter with everything I have, and I'm prepared to prove that sometimes the most important business decisions happen outside the boardroom. The battle for Isabella was about to begin, and Marcus Wellington had never fought for anything more important in his life. The DNA results arrived 30 minutes before the custody hearing. Dr. Martinez handed Marcus the sealed envelope with trembling hands, her expression a mixture of amazement and disbelief. Mr. Wellington, I've been practicing pediatric medicine for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. Marcus tore open the envelope, though his heart already knew what it would confirm. The technical language blurred together until he found the conclusion. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Isabella was his daughter. His biological daughter. Marcus sank into the chair beside her bed, the paper shaking in his hands. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open with new clarity, the first time she'd been truly conscious since the transfusion. Papai? She whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in days. I'm here, sweetheart. Marcus took her small hand, marveling at how much it resembled his own. How do you feel? Better. The nice doctor said you gave me some of your blood to make me strong. Marcus's throat tightened. Yes, I did. Isabella smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since his return from Tokyo. Now we match on the inside too. Before Marcus could respond, Elena Santos, the nurse who had been Victoria's friend, arrived with Rebecca. Elena was a woman, in her 50s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much suffering. "Mr. Wellington," Elena said softly, "I need to tell you what happened 6 years ago." Marcus stood, never releasing Isabella's hand. "Tell me everything." "Victoria was 8 months pregnant when she found you in the business journals. She'd been trying to reach you for months, but—" Elena glanced at Isabella, choosing her words carefully. Someone was intercepting her calls, returning her letters. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. Someone? A man who said he was protecting your interests. Said you'd made it clear you didn't want contact with Victoria or any complications from your past relationship. "David," Marcus breathed. Elena nodded. "He convinced Victoria that you'd moved on, that you'd be angry about the pregnancy. Victoria was devastated, but she was also proud. She decided to raise the baby alone." Marcus closed his eyes, imagining Victoria pregnant and abandoned, believing he'd rejected both her and their child. When complications arose during delivery, Elena continued, "Victoria made me promise something. If anything happened to her, and if Isabella ever needed help, I should find a way to get her to you. She said, Marcus doesn't know what he wants, but he has a good heart. He'll love her if given the chance." "But Victoria died and the baby went to foster care?" Elena shook her head. "No. A man came to the hospital, said he was family, that he'd arranged private care. He took Isabella when she was 3 days old." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "David. He said you were too busy building your empire to be bothered with a baby. That he'd ensure she was properly cared for until you were ready." The betrayal was staggering. David had known about Isabella from the beginning, had kept Marcus from his daughter for 6 years, allowing him to grieve for Ethan while his living child grew up with strangers. Rebecca checked her watch. "Marcus, the hearing starts in 15 minutes. At the courthouse, Marcus walked into the hearing room to find David already seated with his attorney, projecting confidence and respectability. The man who'd stolen 6 years of fatherhood from him sat there in his tailored suit, preparing to argue that Marcus was unfit to raise his own child. Judge Sarah Hendricks called the hearing to order. "This is an emergency custody hearing regarding Isabella Morrison, currently in the care of Marcus Wellington. Mr. Harrison, you may present your case." David's attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, stood confidently. "Your Honor, we request immediate removal of the child from Mr. Wellington's care. Our evidence shows a pattern of instability, abandonment of responsibilities, and emotional dysfunction that makes him unsuitable as a guardian." For 30 minutes, she presented David's case. Marcus's erratic work schedule, his resignation from Wellington Industries, his absence during Isabella's medical emergency, testimony from board members about his concerning behavior. When Marcus's attorney presented their counter-evidence, school reports, medical records, testimonials about his devotion to Isabella, David's side dismissed it as recent attempts to appear suitable. Then Marcus stood to testify. "Your Honor, I'd like to present new evidence that fundamentally changes this case." Marcus handed the DNA results to the judge. Her eyebrows rose as she read. "Mr. Wellington, are you saying you're Isabella's biological father?" "Yes, Your Honor. And I'm also saying that Mr. David Wellington has known this fact for 6 years and deliberately kept me from my daughter." The courtroom erupted. David's face went white as Marcus's attorney presented Elena Santos's testimony. Phone records showing blocked calls from Victoria, and financial records proving David had paid for Isabella's care while hiding her existence. Judge Hendricks studied the evidence with growing astonishment. "Mr. David Wellington, are these allegations accurate?" David stood slowly, his composure finally cracking. "Your Honor, I was protecting my cousin from distraction during a critical business period. The company employs thousands of people. You hid a man's daughter from him for 6 years, Judge Hendricks said with barely controlled anger, and then initiated custody proceedings against him when he discovered her existence and chose to prioritize her welfare. David's attorney whispered frantically in his ear, but the damage was done. Judge Hendricks turned to Marcus. "Mr. Wellington, your daughter is waking up from her medical treatment. Perhaps you should be with her instead of in my courtroom." "Thank Your Honor. As Marcus left the courthouse, David caught his arm in the hallway. Marcus, I can explain. Marcus turned, his eyes blazing with a fury David had never seen. You cost me 6 years with my daughter. 6 years of bedtime stories, first steps, birthday parties. 6 years while she grew up thinking she was unwanted. Was protecting the company. You were protecting your own ambition, Marcus said quietly. And now you'll have it. Enjoy running Wellington Industries, David. You paid a hell of a price for it. Marcus walked away from his cousin, his company, and his old life, heading back to the hospital where his daughter was waiting for him to come home. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the doorway of Isabella's room. No longer Ethan's room, but truly hers now. Painted lavender with stars on the ceiling and filled with her artwork. Isabella sat cross-legged on her bed, completely recovered from her health crisis, carefully arranging photographs in a scrapbook. What are you working on, sweetheart? Marcus asked, settling beside her on the bed. Our family book, Isabella said proudly, showing him pages filled with pictures from their short but intense time together, hospital photos where she's smiling despite the IV lines, images of them painting together, snapshots Rebecca had secretly taken of their breakfast routines. On the final page, Isabella had placed Victoria's hospital photo next to a recent picture of Marcus and Isabella together. Below it, in her careful 6-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My mama who went to heaven and my papa who came home." Marcus's throat tightened. It's beautiful. Elena gave me more pictures of Mama yesterday. Isabella pulled out a small envelope. Want to see? Marcus nodded, though his chest ached with anticipation. Isabella showed him photos he'd never seen. Victoria pregnant, glowing with happiness despite her circumstances. Victoria holding newborn Isabella in the hospital, her face radiant with love and fierce protection. She looks happy, Marcus said softly. Elena says Mama loved you very much, even when you couldn't be together. She says Mama would be proud of us now. Marcus studied his daughter's face, Victoria's delicate features combined with his own stubborn chin and determined eyes. What do you think about all this, Isabella? Learning that I'm your real father? Isabella considered this with the serious thoughtfulness that still amazed him. I always knew, she said simply. Not in my brain, but in my heart. That's why your house felt like home right away. But how could you know? Isabella leaned against his shoulder, her small body warm and solid against him. When you held me that first night in the storm, it felt like I'd been waiting my whole life for those arms. And when you gave me your blood in the hospital, it felt like we were always supposed to be connected. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, marveling at the wisdom contained in such a small person. I'm sorry I wasn't there from the beginning. But you're here now, Isabella said with characteristic directness. And Elena says sometimes the best families are the ones that find each other, even if it takes a long time. That afternoon, they walked through the gardens of their estate, no longer a monument to Marcus's isolation, but a playground for Isabella's imagination. She'd convinced him to install a tire swing and had declared a section of wildflowers her art inspiration garden. Papai, do you miss being the boss of that big company? Isabella asked as they settled on the garden bench where she liked to sketch. Marcus considered the question. In the weeks since his resignation, Wellington Industries had indeed thrived under David's leadership. The business world had moved on without him just as he'd always feared it would. But instead of feeling diminished, Marcus felt liberated. No, sweetheart, I found something much more important to do with my time. What's that? Being your father. Marcus had started a small consulting firm, working from home and choosing projects that excited him, rather than simply pursuing endless growth. His new clients appreciated his experience, but more importantly, his schedule allowed him to attend every school event, every art class, every moment that mattered to Isabella. Elena asked if we want to visit Mama's grave next week. Isabella said quietly. Would that be okay? Of course. We'll bring flowers. And maybe we could tell her about our life now. About how you read to me every night and how we make pancakes. On Sunday mornings, Marcus's vision blurred with unshed tears. I think she'd love to hear about all of that. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Isabella made an announcement that stopped Marcus in his tracks. I've decided I want to change my name, she said solemnly. Marcus felt a stab of panic. Change it how? Isabella Wellington. So everyone knows I belong with you. The simple statement undid him completely. Marcus knelt beside her bed, taking her small hands in his large ones. Isabella, you've always belonged with me. From the moment you were born, you were mine. I just didn't know it yet, and now you do. Now I do. And I'm never going to forget it again. As Isabella drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat in the chair by her bed, the same vigil he'd kept during her hospital stay, but now peaceful rather than fearful. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, driven, isolated, measuring success in quarterly profits and market dominance. That man had built an empire but had been slowly dying inside. This man, Isabella's father, had found a richness that no amount of money could purchase. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, now CFO of his consulting firm. The Morrison Foundation Board approved the funding. We can start construction on the Children's Art Center next month. Marcus smiled. The Morrison Foundation, named for Isabella's foster identity, would provide art therapy and creative programs for children in the foster system. Isabella had insisted that kids like her needed places where their feelings can become beautiful things. Looking down at his sleeping daughter, Marcus marveled at the complete transformation of his life. The storm that had brought Isabella to his door had indeed been a gift. Not just of a child to love, but of a second chance to become the man he'd always been meant to be. Thank you, Victoria, he whispered to the darkness. Thank you for giving me our daughter and for believing I could learn to be worthy of her. Isabella stirred in her sleep, reaching out instinctively. Marcus took her hand, and she settled, with a contented sigh. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to choose love over ambition. But tonight Marcus Wellington was exactly where he belonged, holding his daughter's hand, finally understanding that he'd found his greatest success in the most unexpected place. The empire builder had become a father, and in doing so, had discovered that the only legacy that truly mattered was love.